Welcome to the Padre podcast. This is the place where I share my heart and mind because I am a forever student and I would like to graduate in heaven, and I hope you do too. This is Father Jose, your host, and this is episode 28 of the Padre podcast, and the title for today's episode is The Route of the Pope, La Ruta del Papa. This is a portion of the message to the Church of Philadelphia, one of the 7 churches of the book of Revelation. I love you because you have kept my message of endurance. I will keep you safe in the time of trial that is going to come to the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. I am coming quickly. Hold fast to what you have, so that no one may take your crown. This is the book of Revelation, chapter 3, verses 9 through 11. Now, you may be wondering, why am I quoting this particular passage? This is because Revelation 3:9 is the very first biblical passage that Pope Leo XIV quotes in his apostolic exhortation, Dilexii Te, I have loved you. It's an apostolic exhortation of the Holy Father to all Christians on love for the poor, which was given in Rome at St. Peter's Square, October 4, the memorial of St. Francis of Assisi last year. This is how the apostolic exhortation begins. I have loved you, Revelation 3:9. The Lord speaks these words to a Christian community that, unlike some others, had no influence or resources, and was treated instead with violence and contempt. You have but little power. I will make them come and bow down before your feet. Revelation 3:8-9. This text reminds us the words of the Canticle of Mary. He has cast down the mighty from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. Right now it's May 2026 when I am recording this Padre podcast, and I had just returned from my home country of Peru, and especially my home diocese of Chiclayo, Peru. And it was the first time that I visited Chiclayo since the election of Pope Leo XIV last year. So it was a completely different experience to be there. Everything lives and breathes Pope Leo XIV in the city of Chiclayo, everywhere. The restaurants, the parks, the municipal buildings, the churches, everywhere. Even the ice cream stores with the famous papaleta, the popsicle of the Pope. And everywhere you go, it says, the Pope was here, the Pope ate here, the Pope sat here, because he was literally everywhere. He was a very missionary-oriented bishop who visited multiple times the many places related to the Diocese of Chiclayo, Peru. You may remember that when Pope Leo was elected as Pope, Cardinal Robert Prevost, he came out of the balcony of St. Peter's Square on May 8, 2025, and one of the first things he did was to greet his beloved Diocese of Chiclayo. Now, I know that Chiclayo and Chicago sounds very similar, but we're talking about 2 very different places. Yes, the Pope is from Chicago, but he spent a good chunk of his life in my home country of Peru, and he was the Bishop of Chiclayo. And it is there where he really learned his love for the poor. Even though he had this experience everywhere in the world, but being there among the poorest of the poor in my home city, that really taught him a lot about his preferential option for the poor. And so it's no surprise that his first apostolic exhortation is about that, about the love for the poor. Now, it just so happened that I decided to visit my family. Well, my sisters told me, come for Mother's Day, please. And so I did. And the Friday before Mother's Day, there was this very special Mass for the first anniversary of the election of Pope Leo. That was May 8 this year, 2026. And the current Bishop of Chiclayo, Edinson Farfán, who is the successor of Bishop Robert Prevost, was the one leading this special Mass in the front of the Cathedral of St. Mary in Chiclayo. And people gathered in the plaza, in the park, for the celebration of Mass and for a cultural event as well. There were many pilgrimages coming from various parishes of the Diocese of Chiclayo to gather in front of the cathedral. Right now, the cathedral is under renovation. It's getting ready because it is very likely that at one point during his pontificate, Pope Leo will return to Chiclayo to visit his beloved people. And so now the responsibility falls on Bishop Edinson Farfán, who is a young bishop, very missionary-oriented, also an Augustinian. And I follow the Facebook page of the Diocese of Chiclayo, and literally he is everywhere. And it's really encouraging to see a very vibrant church, and especially in the many parishes of the Diocese of Chiclayo. Now, one of the things that I decided to do while being there was to follow what it is called in Spanish La Ruta del Papa. La Ruta del Papa, the route of the Pope, is an effort by the Ministry of Tourism of Peru, and they have created this list of places that pilgrims can come and visit, places where Pope Leo served, and places that are directly related to the ministry of Bishop Robert Prevost, now Pope Leo XIV. So I decided to do that. And I had one of my sisters with me, and so we had time to go and visit some of these places. There was no way I could cover everything, but at least we did some of them. So the first place we went to is Zaña. Zaña, Z-A-N-A. That little N with a little thing on top. Zaña. So Zaña, it's important because on the eve of his ordination as Bishop of Chiclayo, Peru, then Father Robert Prevost came to Zaña, Peru, to pray before the relics of Santo Toribio de Mogrovejo. Padre Roberto, he was known at the time by the locals. He spent the entire night in vigil asking for the intercession of the saint. There was this little chapel in the local parish of Zaña where there are a couple of pieces of relics. They look like bones of Santo Toribio de Mogrovejo. Now, why is Santo Toribio so important for Peru? Well, it's because Santo Toribio de Mogrovejo was the second bishop of Lima, Peru. But at the time, his diocesan territory was pretty much all South America, including Zaña, which is in the north part of Peru. And so Santo Toribio accomplished 4 canonical visits to all the missions of his diocese, including the mission of Zaña. And actually, Santo Toribio died in Zaña in 1606. So remember, Santo Toribio was the second Archbishop of Lima. The original tomb of Santo Toribio is still there in Zaña, and I had the great joy of visiting it with my sister. And so at the time, this place of Zaña had many convents and many churches. So I'm going to talk about that. Now, even though Santo Toribio died in Zaña in 1606, his body was moved to Lima, to the Cathedral of Lima, in 1607. But because of tradition, we have been able to preserve still the place where he was originally entombed. And then on top of that, these small relics of him are still kept in the local parish of Zaña. So you have to imagine Padre Roberto going to this little town of Zaña, which is in the middle of nowhere, and asked the local pastor, please let me stay all night in vigil in prayer. I want to pray for the intercession of Santo Toribio for my episcopacy, which was going to take place the next day. And so that's exactly what he did. Very significant place on the life of Pope Leo, on the eve of his ordination as bishop. Now, why Sanya is so important? On March 15 of 1720, a terrible flood destroyed colonial Sanya. The city was abandoned completely, and there are still ruins of the 14 churches and monasteries of colonial Sanya that have remained, and the original site of the tomb of Santo Toribio, and people can come there in prayer. I have to confess, I've never been to Sanya before, and it is only an hour away from my hometown. But anyways, the route of the Pope afforded me the possibility of going to this tiny little town to explore the ruins and the local parish there, part of the route of the Pope. So Santo Toribio de Mogrovejo, pray for us, and pray for Pope Leo and his ministry for the Universal Church. There is another place associated with the route of the Pope, and it is the place of the Eucharistic miracle of Eten. Last year, here at our parish, we had the opportunity of bringing the exhibition of the Eucharistic miracles that St. Carlo Acutis put together. And in it, there are many Eucharistic miracles, more than 100, and in it, it describes the only Eucharistic miracle of Peru, and it happened in the city of Eten. Now, Eten is about 30 minutes away from Chiclayo, and my sister, Andrea, is a teacher in that little town. Once again, a tiny little town. But what happened is that when Pope Leo, Bishop Robert Prevost, was the Bishop of Chiclayo, he showed great interest in this Eucharistic miracle. We are talking a Eucharistic miracle that happened in 1649, a very long time ago, during the time of colonial Eten. Actually, when he became a Cardinal Robert Prevost, he brought to Pope Francis testimonials of about 20,000 people who have been blessed by this Eucharistic miracle, so that it may receive official recognition from the Church. Actually, Bishop Robert Prevost showed interest into making a very large shrine dedicated to the Eucharistic miracle. Right now it's tiny, it's very, very small. So it would not be a surprise that if during his pontificate, this place is going to become a mega place of pilgrimage. And my sister happens to teach in that town. So how can we describe the history of this particular miracle? It was June 2nd, 1649, when during Eucharistic adoration, the child Jesus was seen in the sacred host, looking from left to right to the people that were adoring him for a period of about 15 to 20 minutes. It was the Vespers of the solemnity of Corpus Christi of that year. Now, there were plenty of witnesses that saw this miracle, the image of the child looking at them. But many people would not believe what they had seen, including the clergy. Despite the multiple witnesses, people doubted this apparition. So almost 2 months later, on July 22nd, the feast of St. Mary Magdalene, patroness of Eten actually, the child appeared for a second time, and he did that to 4 clergymen during Eucharistic adoration. This time, he was visibly mad at people's lack of faith and kept looking sideways to the church's ambo, and the child was dressed in purple. This apparition once again happened for about 15 to 20 minutes, but towards the end of the image of the child appearing on the host, then the image turned into 3 overlapping hearts, which very early in the tradition were interpreted as an image of the Most Holy Trinity. And that's it. That is the Eucharistic miracle of Eten. So this is something that happened on two different occasions in 1649. So the tradition now is to display a small statue of the child Jesus dressed in Peruvian costume, and he is in front of a representation of a super large host monstrance like. And so that is the image of what we call El Niño del Milagro, the child of the miracle, the Eucharistic miracle of eating. So I had this wonderful opportunity of being at not only the actual site where the miracle happened, which now it has just a tiny chapel and some ruins of colonial eating, but also at the local parish where the image of the child is kept and where Pope Leo has come to celebrate Mass multiple times because of his loving dedication to this Eucharistic miracle. Another place related to the ministry of Bishop Robert Prevost is my home parish of Lambayeque, which he visited many times. And so as I was preparing for Mass, I celebrated Mass a couple times in my home parish of San Pedro. I noticed in the sacristy they have pictures of all the bishops of Chiclayo, and of course there is the current bishop, Edinson Farfán, and right before is Robert Prevost, who is now the Pope. Unbelievable. And so it was a great joy to visit my home parish, my family, the people of the local community. I celebrated a private Mass for my family on Saturday the 9th of May, and the public Mass at 11 a.m. With the community there. The church is absolutely incredible. My home parish of Lambayeque was established in the late 1500s. The current church is from the 1600s. Some of the altars of the church are from the 1700s, and there are some beautiful frescoes as well. Unfortunately, many of them are in disrepair because of the environment of the area. We are in the middle of the desert, but still the church is absolutely gorgeous. It's really a masterpiece of religious art, a combination of Renaissance with colonial art. And so this is a church where I was an altar boy when I was a little kid, and so it's always a great joy to return to my home parish. One place that I didn't visit during this time was the Shrine of Our Lady of Peace, Nuestra Señora de la Paz. But I had visited this place many times before, and it is also part of the route of the Pope. It's a rather modern shrine dedicated to Our Lady of Peace. This modern shrine was established in 1985 when we were in the thick of the internal Peruvian conflict, something that Bishop Prevost himself, or Father Prevost at the time, witnessed. He saw how we Peruvians were killing each other, unfortunately. We're talking about a conflict that took the lives of almost 70,000 Peruvians. And so he, Father Prevost, from very young age in his priesthood, he learned the consequences of conflict. That's why he preaches so much about peace, because conflict leads to nowhere. And so he saw it firsthand. By the time that he was Bishop of Chiclayo, the conflict was over. So literally we prayed for peace, and the Lord granted it to us because of our prayers. The last place that I visited was Lima. And Lima is very dear to me, not only because one of my sisters lives there, but because colonial Lima, it's the heart of the greatest saints that we had. And these saints are the pillars of Peruvian Catholicism. Peru has a rich tradition of Catholic saints and blessed, primarily centered around the city of Lima in the 16th and 17th centuries. And this includes St. Rose of Lima. St. Rose of Lima was like the St. Catherine of Siena of Peru. And so St. Rose of Lima was the first saint of the Americas. Her name was Isabel Flores de Oliva, and she lived between 1586 and 1617. And she was not a nun, even though she was dressed like a nun. She was a lay woman, and so she was part of the Third Order Dominican, and that's why she was allowed to wear the habits. And she was a dedicated nurse to the poor, and she was a mystic, and she is the greatest saint that we have in Peru. A young lady totally in love with Jesus Christ and in love with Jesus Christ crucified. And so she offered many spiritual sacrifices for the church and for the world. So we really honor her in our home country of Peru, and so that's why I visited her tomb. She's actually buried in the monastery of St. Dominic in downtown Lima. That's where she donated her body to the church, to the Dominicans, and they have kept her in this particular place, and I had the honor to visit it. Now, in that very same monastery of St. Dominic, we also have St. Martin de Porres, because St. Martin de Porres, he was a Dominican friar, and he was the porter, he was the nurse of the convent, and he was the charitable hand of the convent as well. And St. Martin de Porres is also buried in this particular convent of St. Dominic in Lima. And he was the very first mulatto saint. He lived between 1579 and 1639. St. Martin de Porres, pray for us. And this place of his tomb is very dear to me, because after Father Andy Booms and I were ordained priests in 2007, June 8, 2007, the following week we went to Peru. And one of our first masses that we had was by the tomb of St. Martin de Porres. So it's a very dear place for me to go back to the beginning of my priesthood as well. There are a couple of other saints. One of them is San Juan Macias, 1585, 1645, and San Francisco Solano, 1549, 1610. And these two saints were known for their charity, for their devotion, but especially for the love that they had for the poor. And then there is another saint, which I have mentioned already, Santo Toribio de Mogrovejo, the second Archbishop of Lima. I visited the Cathedral of Lima. It's absolutely beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And so when visiting the cathedral, then I visit the relics of Santo Toribio, so the main relics of the saint that are kept in the proper place where he led the Church of Lima from. And so it was a nice bookends for this pilgrimage of the route of the Pope to actually visit not only the first place where he was buried in Saña, but now the place where his remains rest in the Cathedral of Lima, Peru. While being in the Cathedral of Lima, there is a canvas, a painting that shows the Mass of dedication of the Cathedral of Lima. I love that because there is this painting that has two panels. The lower panel is the actual Mass of dedication, and the higher panel is the Most Holy Trinity receiving an image of the cathedral that is being carried by the saints of Peru. And you can clearly see especially St. Rose of Lima. So I love that painting because it really shows that the liturgy is not just the work of the people down here on earth, but it is the work of the saints up there in heaven, presenting our prayers and supplications to God. And so I love that painting, so I wanted to take some pictures of that so that you can see it. The dedication of the Cathedral of Lima, Peru, to the Most Holy Trinity. And there you have it. This was my experience of visiting my family, but also being part of the route of the Pope. It's something that is promoted widely nowadays in my home country of Peru. I know that here in the United States, we all say about the American Pope. But when you go to Peru, it's the Peruvian Pope because he also has Peruvian citizenship. So we are very grateful, ecstatic actually, that one of our own is now the Supreme Pontiff, that now he serves the Universal Church. And so when I speak of Chiclayo, Peru, and Peru in general, this is the diocese that formed the Pope. And it happened to be my home diocese. Unbelievable. With not in a million years we would ever think that something like this would happen. But it happened. And so we're very grateful to God for having called this man one of our own, both from the United States and serving in Peru now to lead the Universal Church. So, Saints of Peru, pray for Pope Leo. Most Holy Trinity, receive the love that we have for our Holy Father. Bless him abundantly. God bless you. You have a great day, and I hope to see you next time in another episode of the Padre podcast. Bye-bye.